Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Lubick, and I want to welcome everyone to a special edition of Are You Ready to Garden? Tonight, we're going to be speaking about the menace which everyone has in almost every county in New Jersey except for Cape May, according to George, and that's the spotted lanternfly. And we're very fortunate tonight to have Dr. George Hamilton from Rutgers University with us. He's one of our entomologists and specialists at the university. George is actually heads up our IPM program, and he helps monitor pest issues going on throughout the state of New Jersey. And we also have our colleagues from Penn State joining us tonight. Emily Schwackhammer is a Hort Extension educator at the Montgomery County Extension Office. She holds a BS degree in plant science from Penn State University and an MS in plant pathology from North Carolina State University. She's been on the educational front line of the spotted lanternfly invasion since its discovery in 2014 and is participating in several research projects to learn more about this invasive insect. We're also very fortunate to have Amy Corman. She's a Hort Extension educator at the Northampton and Lehigh counties for Penn State. She holds a BS in biology and an MS and PhD degrees in entomology from North Dakota State University and Louisiana State University, respectively. Her responsibilities include providing research-based solutions for landscape problems such as weeds, pest, and disease. So we've got a great lineup for you tonight. And I can see we've got a lot of people that have joined us because this is a very popular topic. We're getting a lot of questions in our extension offices about the spotted lanternfly. So Dr. George Hamilton is going to lead us off tonight. And then we're going to get into what's going on in New Jersey and then what's going on in Pennsylvania. And we're going to talk a little bit about control and we're going to show you a few videos. And at the very, very end, we're actually going to show you a video of how to build your own trap for the spotted lanternfly. So you want to stay tuned to the very end and also fill out our survey at the end because that provides us valuable information so that Rutgers Cooperative Extension can keep providing you information that's current throughout the entire season. I just want to put in a plug for the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station, which is the reason that we're here because the funding that we get through New Jersey Ag Experiment Station at Rutgers State University enables George and myself and my other colleagues at Rutgers to do the research that we do and be able to bring you the valuable information from the experiment station and from our colleagues at Rutgers and at Penn State and Cornell and other universities that work together with us. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. George Hamilton, and Dr. George Hamilton is going to give us an overview of the spread of spotted lanternfly in New Jersey. Dr. Hamilton, welcome.
Thank you, and welcome to everybody who's online tonight to hear about this insect that many people, as Bill has said, are interested in here in New Jersey. And so I'm going to spend my time talking a little bit about where this all started and then how it entered New Jersey and where it's gone since it's entered New Jersey. We'll also talk a little bit about its life cycle. We'll talk a little bit about host plants that it feeds on. This insect, spotted lanternfly, is in the family Fulgoridae. It is a leaf hopper, and it is an invasive plant hopper from northern China. And I just want to quickly define what invasive means because people do have a misunderstanding of what this means. Invasive doesn't necessarily mean that you are from another area or country. Invasive means that you have come here to this area and you are now causing some kind of economic or environmental damage. That's what invasive means in terms of what we're talking about tonight. And so far, this insect has shown some economic damage in agriculture, and it is definitely causing, I would say, some environmental damage as well. It is also invasive in Asia and South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, Japan. And this insect has a preference for feeding on plants that have high sugar content. It is a fluid feeder. It has sucking mouth parts, and it feeds on the fluids that it extracts from a variety of plants. So initially, as Bill said, it was introduced into Pennsylvania in Berks County. A local person there came across it, reported it to the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. And as the story goes, as it does with many insects recently from Asia that get imported into the country, we were off and running. And very quickly, since then, this insect has spread throughout a great deal of Pennsylvania. Initially, Berks County was in a quarantine situation, and that was extended to all of the counties that you see here in purple, and it is now extended into several other counties in Pennsylvania this last year, and those are the counties that you see here that are in blue. Here in New Jersey, we had our first introduction into the state that we're aware of in 2018. It happened late in the fall, and as the story goes, somebody had gone to Pennsylvania to shop for a Christmas tree, had cut down their own tree, brought it back to New Jersey in Warren County, set the tree up inside. The tree warmed up because, of course, it was inside. The egg masses hatched, and all of a sudden they had these little insects that they didn't know what it was running around on their tree. They had the foresight to call the Department of Agriculture here in New Jersey. They came up, took a look at it, and very quickly disposed of all the insects and probably the Christmas tree as well. It then appeared again in 2018 in Mercer County. And at that point, the Department of Agriculture put into effect a 3-county quarantine with Warren, Mercer, and then with Hunterdon County in the middle, figuring that if it was in Warren and Mercer, it would probably show up in Hunterdon, and it did very, very quickly show up in Hunterdon County. In 2019, it was found in an additional 3 or 4 other counties here in New Jersey, and this also led to an increase in the number of counties that we had quarantined here in New Jersey. And so at the university, one of the things that we like to do with these invasive insects or these new introductions is to do a little citizen science and start a reporting system via email through our website that was developed for this insect. And these are just maps of where we were getting the reports in 2018, 19, and in 2020. And you can very quickly see the spread of this insect just from these reports. 2018, we had a few in the counties that we knew about. That increased in that original area in 2019, and in 2020 you can see that it greatly expanded. Now we suspended this reporting site because this last year because we decided along with help from the Department of Agriculture that this insect was pretty much all over the state. And again, and the Department of Agriculture verifies this. They don't know of any established colonies or populations in Cape May County, but they do have established populations in all the other counties here in New Jersey. And so, as I mentioned, we started with a 3-county quarantine in 2018. Again, the Department of Agriculture expanded that to 7 counties in 2019. And as just 2 weeks ago, they added an additional 5 counties to that list of quarantine counties. Now, being quarantined means something. It actually means that there are regulations that state that you are not allowed to move certain materials in and out of the quarantine area. And here in New Jersey, both commercial operations and private citizens are required to inspect their vehicles and the things that they are moving out of the quarantine area if they're taking them someplace else. to be sure that they're not going to bring this insect into areas where it doesn't currently occur. Now, there's also been a lot of questions about reporting, and the Department of Agriculture is still running their reporting website, and I've given you the address here for that website. It's badbug.nj.gov. Currently, they are looking for reports from counties that are not in the quarantine area. And if we have anybody on tonight from Cape May County, if you see what you think may be an established population in Cape May, please report it to the Department of Agriculture as soon as you can, so they can come down and check it out. Now, when I say established populations, I'm not talking about one that might be on the sidewalk or one that might be on a vehicle. If you have a tree that has several of these on the tree, or even more than that, that's a situation where it should be reported. So here's our quarantine area, and this is the map that's right off of the Department of Ag website. The red counties were the original counties in those first two rounds in 2018 and 19 that were quarantined. The blue counties are all the other counties where we know this is at, and the counties where I've put stars next to are the ones that they just quarantined 2 weeks ago. And again, according to the Department of Ag, no established populations in Cape May. So we are not the only ones, and Pennsylvania is not the only ones that have established populations. If you take a look at this map, they are in New York, and they are in the boroughs surrounding Manhattan. They are in Central Park, and in fact, I think next week or the week after, I'm going with some people from Connecticut to Staten Island to collect egg masses and remove them from trees. It's also in Delaware. There are populations in Maryland, in Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, right across the border from Pennsylvania, and then up in the Cleveland area. And the newest one that I'm aware of is one that's in Indiana. There was another one, though, that has made a great deal of press, and that was at the Kansas State Fair a couple of weeks ago, where a 4-H'er had an insect collection on display at the fair, and there was a spotted lanternfly in the collection that he said he collected in Kansas. And probably what we've got here is a hitchhiker type of situation. We do have some idea of where we think this insect might be able to establish itself in high populations. This map was developed by the USDA, and it's basically looking at conditions and modeling where this might occur. And so the areas of greatest concern are the ones here that are in red. And so you can see the East Coast, a good deal of the Midwest is in red as well here. And then we have places like the Central Valley in California and the coastal areas where there's a lot of agriculture. And so this is something that the USDA does, or other people do quite frequently with these insects. They did this with brown marmorated stink bug, the one I used to work with. This gives us a good idea, but it does not give us a perfect understanding of where this insect might become a big problem in terms of its numbers. So here's an adult. It's very colorful, as you see in some of the other pictures. It has hind wings that are red with black polka dots and grayish wings with black polka dots. It's an inch long. It's bigger than any other leafhopper or plant hopper that I know of here in New Jersey or in the East Coast. It's not a very good flyer, but it is a very good jumper, and it is a very good climber as well. And so to start the discussion about the life cycle, I have pictures here of an egg mass and a mass that's hatched. And if you can see my pointer, that's up in this area. The adults are out there now mating. The females have begun to lay eggs here in New Jersey. That can occur anytime from August to November, depending on temperatures. When it gets cold enough in the fall, it gets too cold for them to survive and they die. They lay 30 to 50 eggs per mass, and this is the overwintering stage for the insects. The adults and juveniles will not be around in the winter time. It's too cold for them, and so they overwinter as eggs, and they start to hatch in the springtime, and they have usually pretty good hatch rates, anywhere from 60 to 90%. They go through 4 nymphal instars. Those are the 4 juvenile stages. The first couple of nymphal stages are black with white spots, and eventually, as they get to the 4th instar, they develop a reddish background with black and white spots, and you can see that in the upper right-hand picture. As I mentioned, they do move around a lot. I've spent all summer in the Rutgers gardens tracking their phenology on different host plants. And it's very interesting that one week they'll be on this tree, and then the next week they're gone and they're on a completely different tree, even a completely different species. So they do move around a lot. Research has been done to look at this, and it's been determined that they can move up to 3¼ feet per minute. And they're also good climbers in terms of the nymphs. They can climb close to 16 feet in 15 minutes. So tree of heaven plays a part in the life cycle of the insect. If you're not familiar with tree of heaven, it is another invasive. It's a native plant to Asia, and it loves disturbed areas. And you can see these all along our roads here in New Jersey, along 287, 80. It is basically everywhere, including outside my greenhouse, and it's on campus here in New Brunswick. All of the instars feed on it. It's thought that the adults needed to mature. Now, the one good thing about their life cycle that I'll mention is that they only have 1 generation per year, which is good because that can limit how fast they build up in terms of populations. Unlike an aphid, in the summer, they can go through many generations per year and generate large numbers of individuals. We get some relief because it only has 1 generation per year. And so here's the traditional progression in terms of overwintering as eggs and hatching in the spring. And so we see that happening, and we see the first instars in May through June. They then molt to the 2nd instar in June and July, 3rd instar in June and July, and then finally the 4th instar anywhere from July to September. I will say here that my colleague and I, Dr. Ann Nielsen, think that they molted to the 4th instars and then ultimately to the adults a little earlier this year than it has the last 2 years. And she and I are thinking that the high temperatures that we had this summer had an impact on how quickly they developed. Insects are cold-blooded, and so the warmer it is, the faster they develop and go through their different life stages. Now, as I said, the adults are out there right now. We see them June to December, and as I said, the females are already out there laying egg masses. And then eventually they die, the eggs overwinter, and then we start the process again the following spring. So there's no obligate diapause for the egg masses. Diapause is what entomologists call basically hibernation. There are some critical temperatures that we have to have in terms of egg hatch. 8 degrees Celsius is the critical threshold for egg hatch. They have to be subjected to that. And they have to have developed what we call degree day accumulations, and that's 550. And that, again, that's just a fancy way that we use to track their development using temperature accumulated on a daily basis. And we use the numbers to predict when certain things might happen in terms of their life cycle. And so there are people working at it. I actually have a grad student that the last 2 summers has been sequestered in Connecticut at the U.S. Forest Service quarantine lab in Ansonia, Connecticut, doing work with temperature, looking at their development at different temperatures on different hosts, and to develop a degree day model that we can use for these predictions. The egg masses can be just about anywhere. They like to lay their eggs on smooth, flat surfaces. In terms of trees, small trees, the egg masses will be probably below 3 meters in height, but it is possible for the egg masses to be higher in the tree in larger trees. And here in New Jersey, Dr. Nielsen has shown that there's a large association between the populations in the woods near vineyards, which is a concern of ours, because so far vineyards is the only agriculture commodity that I know of that's been shown to have some kind of economic damage because of these insects. And in association with wild grapevines. And again, they like grapes. And so wild grapevines in the woods is not a good thing if you have a vineyard and are growing grapes to try and make wine. They have a lot of host plants. This is just a snapshot of some of the common host plants based on plant family. And if you look through here, there are some common things that we have in the woods here in New Jersey, including sugar and red maple, dogwood, black locust, American beech, walnut, mulberry. They do feed on pine, although not to the extent I don't believe that they do on other things, and then poplar, tree of heaven, and then wild grape, Virginia creeper, and some of the other vines that are out there as well. Preferred hosts are on the left here, and so tree of heaven, black walnut, grape, silver red maple. Some of the ones I just mentioned. The work has also been done to figure out what they can complete development on, and that means they can feed on it and go through all their different life stages. And so there are a lot of trees out there that they can feed on and do just fine. Now, I hope everybody knows what a tree of heaven looks like, and this is a picture of a mature tree of heaven. A lot of people, though, are not familiar with the fact that tree of heaven have male plants and they have female plants. And so if you look along the sides of the roads at Tree of Heaven and you start to see those yellow inflorescence that are in the upper right hand picture, that is designation of a female tree, and eventually you'll start to have pods, which at this point are starting to turn dark brown. The Tree of Heaven can be confused with sumac, and so this is just a very quick how do you tell the difference? You look at the leaves, and the leaves on the branches have these little tooth-like structures at the base of the leaflet. The margins of the leaf are very smooth, and if you crush them, it's said that it smells like a peanut butter odor. I'm not sure it does, but I have allergies, so I don't smell very well to start with. But people do say it has a peanut butter odor. And so that is going to be my last slide. And so, what do we need you to do? Well, identify the bug, and if you're in an area that's not in the quarantine, please report it. The good news, as I said, is we have one generation per year, so that's going to help. grapes and landscape ornamentals are the primary agricultural risk. And we tell people, if possible, kill them, squish them, slap them, smash them, spray them with insecticides. My colleagues from Penn State are going to talk about some of those management areas. And this snapshot is another picture that Dr. Nielsen took. This is her state vehicle, and she was over in Pennsylvania when this first began to see what was going on over there. And this is just a picture to reinforce the fact that if you're going out of the quarantine zone, please check your vehicles and the things you're transporting. And so, Dave, you want to run the video now?
Yep, we're going to run the video next, and I just want to remind people to, when they report it, they can contact www.badbug.newjersey.gov and click on the Spotted Lanternfly in order to report where it's at.
What we're looking at here is an ailanthus or tree of heaven that is being fed on by spotted lanternfly. Today, the populations are not as high on this tree as they have been in the past couple of weeks. This is a plant that they need to feed on as adults in order to survive. And all of the ailanthus here in this little area, it has spotted lanternfly on it. And you can see them here, and they're moving up and down the tree, and they're feeding. All this dark area that you see at the base of the tree is the result of the honeydew that they excrete in large amounts that promotes the growth of a mold called sooty mold, and that's the black that you're seeing here. And if we looked at each of these trees, these ailanthus trees in this area, you would see a similar thing here around the base of the tree. And if the foliage on the surrounding plants had died back, you'd also see this mold growing on the leaves of those plants as well. Again, it's a black sooty mold. So that's fresh deposit on the leaves. So for those of you that are familiar with the campus, this was taken out in the Rutgers Gardens in the wooded area between the pine tree grove and the creek. And I mentioned that these populations were much lower than they were a couple of weeks ago. Prior to the hurricane coming through, these trees had hundreds of them on them. I know because I was counting them. And the day I was out there and we took this video, there may have only been about 20 on there. And I think the heavy rain that we had may have had an impact on those populations. Although I'm not positive, I can't really say that for sure.
George, thank you very much. Do we have any questions there, Angela?
I do. About eggs being laid, if they could be laid above 3 meters high. George, you were saying for smaller trees, it's about 3 meters, but it could be higher, correct?
Correct, yes. Depending on the size of the tree.
And then how many egg masses can females lay in a year?
Oh, wow, I don't actually know that information. I apologize.
Is it more than one?
Oh, definitely more than one.
Okay. And then about how many eggs per mass?
30 to 60, I think,
right.
69. Yeah, I'd say around 60.
And then have you heard about anything, any information about spotted lanternfly being toxic to dogs?
Oh, there's been a lot of debate about that. It's somewhat related to what they feed on, because the lick tree of heaven has toxic chemicals in it. I have not read anything in terms of the literature that people have actually looked at that, but I may be wrong.
George, in looking at the veterinary posts that I've seen, I've seen where some animals can get a little bit upset stomach, but I haven't seen anything indicating that, it's beyond that. But depending on what it's feeding on, like you're saying, will depend on the accumulated toxins within the insect. I have a quick question for you too, though, on the host range, because it seems like the host range, every time I look, it's been greatly expanding. Is that what you're seeing too, that the host range that we originally thought that this was limited to, you're seeing that expanded?
Yes, it is expanding. This is not atypical. We saw exactly the same thing for the brown marmorated stink bug. We had a pretty good understanding of what it fed on in Asia, but once it got here, it seemed like the more we looked, the more hosts we found it on.
Is that because the population, as it climbs, just like with the same with deer, that they become less fussy about what they're going to eat and they just start searching for other hosts?
Well, it could possibly be that, but it could also possibly be related to the fact that, these insects didn't evolve with the plants that we have here. And so the plants themselves may not have the defenses that they do in Asia where they're native to. And so that gives them the ability to feed on them.
Thank you so much, George. Appreciate it. You're going to hang around with us, right, and answer questions on the.
Yes, I am.
Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Emily Swackhammer and Amy Corman, our colleagues and friends from Penn State. And they've been on the forefront of dealing with a spotted lanternfly as it first arrived in their state. And they have a lot of great information to share with you this evening. And we're very fortunate to have Emily and Amy with us tonight. Welcome.
Okay, so we're together tonight, so we're going to share the presentation. We just wanted to tell everybody about what we've done this spring to incorporate the newest research results that we have into our educational materials. So if you go to the Penn State Extension Spotted Lanternfly website under the management button, you'll find a lot of good things there, but specifically we have produced the Spotted Lanternfly Management Guide this year, and that is a multi-page color, nice document. You can download the PDF. You can see it, all as a scrolling document as well. And we did this because we were generating so many fact sheets and people were starting to kind of get lost in, which fact sheet they needed. So we tried to put it all into one place for this year. So that is appropriate for anybody to read. But specifically, then we have some information in more detail for landscape professionals and people who are growing grapes. And those are also updated from 2021. So we just wanted to point that out. So I'm going to skip through the maps because Dr. Hamilton covered that, but it started in Berks County, and that's where I live. So I've been following this all along. I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the impact that we've seen of spotted lanternfly in Pennsylvania. And this is a picture Amy and I were able to go out and visit some vineyards. This was taken in October of 2019 in Berks County. And these vines had been fed upon pretty heavily by lanternfly for 2 seasons. And what they do, they withdraw so much sap from the plant, then the vines aren't able to make it through the winter. So they die over the winter. And this is a block of Gewürztraminer. And there are blocks of other vines up there in the background that are other cultivars. So we are looking at sensitivity of different cultivars of grapes and how well they might withstand different feeding levels. So that's part of the grape work that's going on. Then I got this slide from Dr. Julie Urban, and she has the economic impact of slides on grapes here. And this is a compilation from the early years. And this work is ongoing, but the take-home message that we have recorded economic damage in grapes. So in 2017, there was a 90% yield loss in a 40-acre planting. In 2018, there was 100% death of an 8-acre Pinot Noir planting. And from 2016 to 2018, we saw a 45% yield reduction in 10 acres of Chardonnay. And then the reporting of this kind of incidents goes on. So more vineyards have been detecting and reporting damage. And we're seeing not only the economic damage, but we're seeing some growers that are reluctant to install new plantings. So there's that kind of impact happening as well. So in this particular study, they were able to document increased application and cost of the insecticides. So Amy's going to talk about the insecticide management possibilities, but we know we can kill spotted lanternfly with insecticides. And what the vineyards have been doing is they're just using those sprays to kill them. So the number of insecticide applications in this study increased from an average of 4.2 applications to 14, and that translates to a pretty big increase in their cost to protect those vines. So this translates into a large dollar amount in large vineyards, and the growers are already at a pretty small margin of profitability, and there's a lot of concern about this. I also wanted to talk a little bit about what we know about damage that they cause to trees. So when lanternfly first started coming through Pennsylvania, there was a lot of fear that they were going to somehow kill a lot of landscape trees, and we have not seen that happen. We have seen wilting, yellowing, or dead branches. So specifically on walnut, the lower picture shows that, where there's a cluster of nymphs on the twig, withdrawing a lot of the sap, and we get that wilting and yellowing and then die back there. We see that on willow and maple and on staghorn sumac, but we have not seen it kill whole trees of those types. We see weeping wounds on the tree, which attracts bees, ants, and wasps, and your video showed that really well. In the nursery industry, we don't know, but we suspect that it could take longer to produce saleable trees because it's just delaying their development because their energy is being withdrawn. And at high numbers, spotted lanternfly stresses trees, and Dr. Kelly Hoover in her lab has measured a reduction in photosynthesis and carbohydrate storage. And we believe that makes the trees more vulnerable to additional stressors like drought pathogens, other insect pests, and we're concerned about this. Dr. Hoover is continuing to try to measure these parameters, but you can imagine that this is a very difficult thing to design an experiment around and get the data. So we're working on it. Of course, they produce honeydew and sooty mold, and they block photosynthesis of the understory trees. That's an ecological concern. But I want to reinforce a message. We have not seen spotted lanternfly kill established trees except tree of heaven if the pressure is high enough. At one point in the early days, we had this idea that maybe spotted lanternfly required Ailanthus, tree of heaven, in order for it to complete its development. And we were using tree of heaven as a trap tree with systemic insecticides. And sure enough, the lanternflies love that tree. They'll feed on that tree that has been treated with those insecticides, and you can kill literally tens of thousands of insects with one tree. So it's an effective method of killing a lot of lanternflies, but unfortunately, we have definitively proven that it is not a requirement for lanternfly to complete its whole life cycle. So it doesn't require tree of heaven. And this is a slide from the first year of that study where you see there in October, the blue bars are the egg masses that were produced in completely enclosed research plots that had Ailanthus in them. And then there were other trees as well in all of these research enclosures. And then the orange bars show how many eggs were produced without Ailanthus in those enclosures. So the take-home message is that Ailanthus contributes to really high population development. It's not required, but somehow we've seen that it benefits the spotted lanternfly, so they develop a little bit faster than they would without it. And also they seem to be able to produce more eggs than they would without it. But the eggs that were produced in this study were viable, and we were able to get them through the entire life cycle without ever tasting a tree of heaven. So we did this study again in 2020 and got very similar data. I think it's important to know that if you have a lot of tree of heaven on your property, or it's close, you have them close to a vineyard or a transportation corridor, it's a good idea to get rid of them if you can, to try to prevent high populations from developing. But it's not going to be the magic magnet that we had at one point hoped. So in Pennsylvania, especially in the part of Pennsylvania where I am, where lanternfly has been around since 2014, this year we have seen reductions in the population. So we just don't have as many as we've had in past years. And this is the biggest question we're getting right now, I think, from the public. What happened to all the lanternflies? And we want to make sure people understand that even though you may not be seeing as many as you did in previous years in these areas, there are a lot of lanternflies in other areas. So we know on the Rutgers campus, they had a lot this year. We know west of Harrisburg, there were a lot. Southern Philadelphia, lower tier Pennsylvania. We've had reports of really high populations in some areas. But in these other areas, we believe there are different factors influencing the populations. And I drew this really simple diagram to just try to help people envision what they are. So Dr. Hamilton mentioned the hurricane that came through and how weather conditions may have affected their populations. And that also interacts with natural enemies. So and I'm going to show you a few of the natural enemies in a minute. But if there are natural enemies that are encouraged by rain, things like beneficial fungi that attack insects, we think, they can interact. And then host plant availability and health. So we had high populations in our area for a couple years. And then, how weak are the trees that they were feeding on heavily? Is there some sort of density dependent signal where, you get a lot of them accumulated in one site and they decide that they need to disperse? How does the health of the trees affect their populations? And these are all things that we need more research on. So we need ecological studies in order to find out the specifics behind this concept. We do believe that lanternfly will probably resurge in some of these areas again. And maybe we're starting to see the beginning of a cyclical pattern of, where we'll have high populations some years, lower populations in another year. And we see that in some other insects. So, perhaps that's what we're starting to see. So biological control. And, this was one of the first questions people started asking, are there any natural enemies out there that will attack them? And we started recognizing right away that praying mantids would eat them, the wheel bug at the bottom will eat them, spiders, birds, some birds will eat them. And, that's all good, but they're general predators. So we started looking into the possibility of predators, or in this case, a parasitoid wasp that might be much more specific for just spotted lanternfly, and that potentially could have a higher impact on reducing their population. So the picture there is out of the local Reading Eagle newspaper, and it's a picture of a tiny parasitic wasp. And there are several types of these wasps out there. There are native to the United States parasitic wasps, but we so far don't have very much evidence that those wasps will attack spotted lanternfly. But the USDA has done searching in Asia looking for parasitic wasps, and they have brought 2 of them to a quarantine lab, and they're currently doing studies to see if this might be something we could use as a control factor in the future. It takes a very long time for that kind of research to happen and then allow anything to be released. So that's a possibility, but it's way down the road. If anybody sees anything out there that they think is interesting, we need eyes and ears, and capture pictures. If you see parasitic wasps after egg masses or nymphs or anything like that, try to catch them and get them to your extension people, because we can help get them to the researchers that are working on these issues. And then we also have seen naturally occurring fungi that attack spotted lanternfly and kill them. And this is where the weather conditions might be assisting in making this happen. So Bavaria bassiana is one of them. There are several others, and studies are ongoing to see if any of these pathogens might be useful for lanternfly control in the future. I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
So hello, everyone. I just want to point out that in these areas that we had incredibly large infestations of lanternflies, we also saw a lot of problems with other trees. And as we peeled back the onion of the lanternfly infestation, we really started to have to ask the question, really, was it the lanternfly? And in many instances, we learned that we really couldn't be so quick to target the lanternfly with these tree problems. In fact, in this particular picture, This is a tree that's in a parking lot. It's a tree in a parking lot. The tree wasn't planted well. It has girdling roots. It's got a lot of things going on with it. And it did have pathogens in it that was causing death of branches and everything, but it was not verticillium wilt, which is what everybody was pointing to. We don't know that the lanternfly contributed thus far. We have not seen the lanternfly be responsible for vectoring any plant diseases. These are other diseases. But as Emily said earlier, spotted lanternfly is a plant stressor. And so in addition to all the other factors in the landscape that contribute to having stressed trees, we had spotted lanternfly. And so there's a lot of finger pointing, but we've been able to say it's not always going to be the lanternfly that does all this damage. So we're going to talk a little bit about spotted lanternfly control or management. But first we have to discuss what we're actually trying to accomplish with lanternfly control. And in order to have that discussion, we have to manage expectations. I want everyone to remember this is probably one of the most key elements that people should walk away with. We can't prevent spotted lanternfly from moving onto any specific property unless it's got hard walls, windows, doors, and it can't go inside. In the outdoors, spotted lanternfly will continue to move around, and there's nothing right now that we can do to stop that. So we get calls all the time where people are worried they see spotted lanternflies in their landscapes, and they're worried that it's going to kill all of their plants, and what can they do about it, and how to determine when is the time that they really need to do something about their spotted lanternfly population. So we developed this risk chart, and that's where we start the discussion with many people on assess what type of strategy you want to employ based on the risk to the plants in your landscape. And we just define risk here as the chance that something bad will happen. Earlier on, Dr. Hamilton talked about all the trees that spotted lanternfly like to feed on, and he made the point that spotted lanternfly really don't like to feed on conifers. So the risk for some kind of damage or something to happen or stress on a tree for a conifer is really low. And that's why we see low risk here on the likelihood of impact. We start at the top of that column on the left. And if your landscape doesn't really have many plants that spotted lanternfly likes, like conifers, the risk is low. And that we go down that chart then to the bottom where we're talking about proximity to vulnerable plants, young plants, vineyards, etc., things that spotted lanternfly will really like. And as we go down there, yes, the risk will elevate, but if the population is low, and that's across the top, we look at the severity of the numbers of the population in the population, how many spotted lanternflies are present. So as long as the numbers are low, it doesn't really matter what kind of plants you have. So as the numbers get higher, and that is moving to the right of this chart, the risk increases. And Emily talked about what happens to grapes. So look in the lower left-hand corner. That's really the highest risk that we talk to. Something bad may happen to grapes when you have intolerable populations of spotted lanternfly and plants they really like and they can do damage to, like grapes. It's just the beginning of the conversation. It was a way to sort of introduce this thought to people who call us and ask us what we need to do about spotted lanternfly. Was first, we have to help them assess the type of plants that are in their landscape so they can figure out what to do about it. And so once we get to that point and say, well, we may not need to do much at all, we teach people all the time about the basics of promoting good plant health, and that's the basis of our IPM strategy. And then we can talk about physical and mechanical controls, and this is where we talk about scraping and smashing eggs and using traps. We're just destroying what we can get our hands on. And we move up this little ladder that we have over here to get to the top of the control strategies, which would be chemical controls. But we'll also have to caution people that the higher up we go in this ladder, from cultural control to chemical control, the environmental impact may also increase. We're talking about harsh pesticides that may have additional consequences in the environment. And the cost for using those tools for management may also increase. And this is a tool that we've used to guide landscape professionals through having discussions with their clients on what types of management strategies they need to use. Homeowners can do the same thing. We have some management options in this chart. A version of this chart is in our fact sheet. I'm going to spend some time briefly going over some of these. We have this nice guide that tells you month by month what the best strategy will do. So here's how we really start peeling this back further. Once someone has addressed the risk and decided what type of product that they want to do, then we can move forward and help them sort this out.
Okay, so one thing that we get a lot of questions about are using traps. And in the early days of the infestation, a lot of people were using sticky bands around trees. And boy, you can catch thousands of lanternflies on them, but they have a really critical drawback in that you can catch other wildlife and even beneficial insects. So now if you're using a sticky band, the picture on the left shows a sticky band. It's one that you get at some of the local stores. We're suggesting two things. Use a narrow strip. So as the lanternflies crawl up the tree, they have to keep crawling up, especially the nymphs have a very strong urge to crawl up because they have to feed up higher where the tree has tender parts that they can get their mouth parts into. They fill from the bottom up. So if you use a narrow strip, you don't have as much area exposed that another animal could get caught up in. So you see that it's a narrow piece. And then you just change them more often. You also really need to have some kind of wildlife guard over that sticky band. So this shows like a window netting and just using push pins and making it kind of like a skirt around there. You need it open at the bottom so the lanternflies can get in and go up to the sticky surface. A better option is using some sort of trap that has no sticky surface to it at all. The picture I have here is one of our homemade traps. We have a fact sheet on our website about how you can do that with like pictures, step-by-step instructions. They get into the skirt part at the bottom and then they crawl up into like a funnel structure and they get captured in that bag and they can't find their way out. So I understand you have also maybe a video of how to build your own traps. They're very useful. You can catch hundreds and hundreds of lanternflies on a tree. You can buy commercially made traps from one company that supplies them. However, we do not have any data from any study that translates how many insects you've caught in your trap to any kind of health quantifiable measure in improvement for the tree. So it makes you feel really good to catch lots of lanternflies and you know, you can catch hundreds of them, but we're not really sure how much good it really does in landscapes where it's a prized tree and you want to protect its health or it's near your patio or something like that. It's a good thing to do, but we can't say that it translates into health benefits for the tree because we just don't have those studies. So the other question that often comes up is, can we spray the trees and the egg masses with something that will kill the eggs? And we know there are some horticultural spray oils, some oils that will have some ovicidal activity. This is the summary slide of what we have learned about this oil question. So first of all, some of the researchers cut some really big trees down and they calculated that 98% of the eggs are above where you can reach by hand or above where you can comfortably spray oils. So, to treat a tree with oil, you would have to have some kind of really, big sprayers. And complete coverage of the egg mass is required to be effective. So the studies that were done with little hand sprayers, and the egg masses were totally saturated. So if you somehow spray a big tree with less than that kind of coverage, you would probably expect to get less efficacy. The eggs are also laid on other materials that are not going to be treated. So if they're on, nearby rocks or fence posts or deck material, or, any other thing that they lay their eggs on, treating all of your trees with oil with big sprayers isn't going to greatly affect the population because it won't touch those eggs. And then from these studies, at the highest labeled rate of oil applications, we still had quite a few of the lanternflies hatching. So it's not 100%, efficacy. Phytotoxicity can be a problem with these oil products, and we did see that in one of the trials. It was a late winter, very early spring application at a high rate of oil, and it burned the bud and the little developing leaves in the bud. And then also you need to consider the cost of these oil applications. We don't know that it's economically rewarding enough to really merit doing it on any big scale.
So we just have a couple short slides to go through, and we'll wrap this up pretty quickly. Other insecticides, we certainly looked at a number of contact and foliar applications, and those are things that we spray on the insects or where they walk or where they feed that will kill them. We also looked at systemic applications of pesticide, and those are pesticides that are applied to the tree or around the tree or the plant, and that are absorbed into the plant and transported throughout the plant. So whenever the insect feeds on it and takes a drink, it gets a poison drink and it dies. What we learned about contact sprays, those are foliar applications, that most of these products have limited residual activity. We're always concerned about the use of spraying pesticides around and the pesticides drifting onto unintended targets. All of these products that we looked at had various levels of toxicity to non-target organisms as well. We're always concerned about non-targets, pollinators, and other insects and animals in the environment. One of the things we really try to drive home most is for people to understand to use these contact insecticides and foliar sprays. All their labels indicate to use after hatch and avoid blooming, flowering plants at that time. And in our fact sheets, in our brochures, we have guidelines there. And you can see in here that many of these products have excellent activity against spotted lanternfly, and some of them, such as beta-cyfluthrin and bifenthrin, also have residual activity as well. Other things like malathion might be excellent, but poor residual activity. So these are considerations one can make when making a decision as with regard to what particular type of pesticide to use. We also evaluated systemic products for spotted lanternfly, and the two active ingredients that are looked at mostly here were dinotefuran and imidacloprid. Both of these active ingredients are neonicotinoid. Why can't I say that today? Neonics. And there's an implication for problems with pollinators and the use of neonics. Of the two types of active ingredients, dinotefuran had the best activity. Imidacloprid was variable. And imidacloprid is not nearly as water soluble as dinotefuran, so it takes a longer time for that material to get through the plant. And even though we know that it will work, the results were much less efficacious than for dinotefuran. Applying systemic insecticides after bloom is really important because you don't want to push that material into the flowers, because we're always concerned about pollinators. The question we always get asked about is how much residual neonics are present in those plants, so that next year when they flower, whether these compounds will show up in the flowers, and we don't know yet. That effect is still under investigation. This is a really critical issue, is not to use home remedies to control spotted lanternfly. Every single one of these products has been suggested for some sort of spotted lanternfly control. We recommend strongly that individuals don't use them. I've got nothing against household detergents, but they're detergents. They're not soaps. If one wishes to use a soap, use an insecticidal soap. These products don't have information on their labels to indicate how to use them, how to store them, and in many cases, some of these compounds may actually be toxic to you, your pets, your other organisms in your environment, your plants, and they're not labeled for this use, and it actually may be illegal to use some of these products as an application for spotted lanternfly control. Our people that the label is the law, to read the label carefully and apply pesticides according to the instructions. And if anyone has a question, call their extension office or call the manufacturer and read the label again. Thank you from Penn State Extension.
Emily and Amy, thank you so much. That was wonderful. And we really appreciate that, especially stressing reading the label, because that's very important not to just go out and start using materials indiscriminately and making up your own products. You want to make sure that these products are labeled for that type of insect and that plant. We are going to show you at the end, after we get through some of our questions, we're going to show you how to make one of these traps if you so desire to do so. Angela, would you like to bring some of those questions forward, some of the main themes that we're getting?
So I have a really good one from one of our local Christmas tree growers. This is about spotted lanternfly concerning the business, and how customers could be reluctant to bring home an infested tree. Is there a way to kind of educate the public on their end and helping them decide that a homegrown Christmas tree is okay to bring into the house?
Yeah, we had a lot of these kind of questions in Pennsylvania. I think one of the main things I try to get people to understand is that spotted lanternfly will, even if, and it's unlikely, but if they would hatch out in your house, they're going to die in a day or so. And they're tiny, tiny, tiny. Like you have to make sure they understand that you're not going to have swarms of adult lanternflies in your house in December. It's just against where their life cycle is. So the Christmas tree growers are doing all they can to inspect their trees and remove egg masses, or, and there's other things that can come in on Christmas trees. I think what comes to mind are praying mantis egg masses sometimes do that. And if it would happen, the lanternflies aren't going to infest their home. They're not going to hurt the children. They're going to die soon. You vacuum them up. And there's so many benefits to having live Christmas tree farms, and they produce oxygen, and supporting the local economy, and all those reasons why it's good to use those kind of trees. So Amy, do you want to add to that?
No, it's a great question, and what the growers can do is really help educate their customers as well to understand what's going on, and to reinforce how to look for spotted lanternflies. They can point them even out to their customers. It's a good teaching moment as well, but it's an excellent question.
George, is it probably not likely that they're going to hatch inside the house?
The only account I know of is the one that was reported to the Department of Agriculture. I agree with the Penn State folks that even if they do hatch, they're not going to cause much of a problem.
Well, and the benefit of supporting local ag and supporting the Christmas tree growers far outweighs, having a couple of spotted lanternflies, because, you're supporting local, you're supporting our growers, and environmentally in the long run, that's going to be the best thing that you can possibly do. So I wouldn't worry as much about a few spotted lanternflies that you can eliminate very quickly.
So spotted lanternfly and their affinity for grapes, can you, maybe Amy and Emily, can you talk about how to go about protecting the grapes from spotted lanternfly?
Yeah, we try to look at it on a landscape scale, first of all. So if there are areas around the vineyards that have tree of heaven, lots of walnut, some of these other hosts that Dr. Hamilton mentioned, like Oriental bittersweet, if the grape grower has any ability to, combat those favorite hosts in that area, or possibly even treat those areas before the lanternflies become winged, and that's when they tend to fly into the vineyard. That's one thing. We also talk about spraying the border rows along those areas and concentrating the investment in the insecticides there, because you're more likely to intercept them with those sprays in those border rows. So do you want to add to
And
that?
that's a really good summary. We're learning more about the distribution of the insect within the vineyard and focusing on the perimeter. What's outside the perimeter and immediately inside the perimeter seems to be a focus of the solution right now.
Yeah, and I'll just add monitor. So, walk the vineyards, see if there's hot spots, areas, cultivars that they prefer, and react to it when you see it, rather than trying to do something as a preventative in a vineyard. I would monitor, and react.
So
And then,
another thing
we had a
that I
question.
see on several questions is the lanthus tree. Amy and Emily, you guys were talking about the fact that even if we can control the lanthus tree, that you're still going to have the problem. So that's not the entire solution, of course, but we do have some businesses out there saying that, they'll control that for you. But now with the research that you guys have done, it's clear that even in controlling the ailanthus tree, tree of heaven, that you could still have the problem and it's still going to migrate to other plants. So that's a matter of educating our landscapers, right? And have you been actively doing that?
Yeah, I think controlling tree of heaven, you have a pretty, you can knock the numbers back that you will see, but you're not going to totally eliminate it. We're focusing on priority areas, near vineyards, near transportation corridors, nuisance areas near recreation, patios, that sort of thing. If you get rid of those plants, you're doing other things in the ecosystem a favor as well, because then some of the native plants might move in if you're managing those areas better. But you're not going to totally eliminate spotted lanternfly by getting rid of tree of heaven.
Are you guys seeing any toxicity problems that if pets, domestic animals eat some of these spotted lanternflies? Have you seen or read anything on that?
I think I've read the same little posts that other people have, and I don't really have much to answer. I think some of this is related to people speculated that, like blister beetles, which contain cantharidin, that spotted lanternflies also had this chemical in them, which does cause blisters. That's why we call it the blister beetle. But the people at Penn, I think, looked at that, and they could really not identify amounts of these chemicals that would be significant. So no, we've seen the same things. We haven't heard of anything. Certainly, I squish spotted lanternflies with my fingers all the time, regardless of what tree they're feeding on, and I haven't had blisters. So I think that some of this may be old wives' tales that sort of got incorporated into the story of spotted lanternfly. And we know that our pets often feast on many insects that brood 10. Cicada emergence is a good example of that, and they'll feast on things until they regurgitate them anyway. My recommendation to people is don't feed them spotted lanternflies. Don't let them eat them. And when we know our pets will be fine, and most pets just kind of ignore them. They might pick them up and play with them, but yeah, that's all we have is sort of anecdotal discussions on what people have observed their pets.
Angela, do you have any other questions?
Any other signs other than sooty mold kind of down at the base of the tree where people should look for egg masses, maybe just, the host trees and some of those other target trees? Is there any other way to kind of spot egg masses?
Practice. Practice looking for egg masses. I mean, it's difficult. The egg mass changes over time. At first, it looks like silly putty smacked on the side of a tree, and then it gets crackly, and looks like some dried mud later on. But they're not just laying their eggs on trees too. They're laying their eggs on underneath park benches and under rocks and on patio furniture and on rusty barrels. And so there's really a lot of things in the environment. If you have a large spotted lanternfly population, you can count on egg masses being found on a lot of different materials. And so it really takes, for people who are just new to this, it's practice on spotting them and trying to figure out, is this a spotted lanternfly egg mass, or is this a lichen, or is it a gypsy moth egg mass, or is it nothing?
Yeah, and when I go out looking for egg masses, I'll look on the undersides of things.
Good point.
So, you know, like they like to lay their eggs on red maple, and I'll look, you know, on the first big branches of the maple, like on that underside. And oftentimes you can find a tree where it, you know, it kind of comes out at an angle. Like look on those undersides, on the sunny sides of trees. They seem to like the warmth. So yeah, under things are in protected areas. Yeah, so we're trying to get residents to use the least toxic methods, and things like labeled insecticidal soap will kill spotted lanternfly, even adults. You don't get sudden instant death where they plummet to the earth with X's in their eyes, but they get agitated and they'll jump away, and then a lot of them will die within the next, you know, couple hours. So we try to teach people to use the least toxic options and have some patience, and maybe look again in a couple days. And if they feel they need to retreat, again, use a very soft product. Once something like insecticidal soap dries, it really has no more insecticidal activity. So it's considered safe for pollinators. And we really want to encourage people to use those products over something that has any sort of residual, whether it's a contact or a systemic.
And I believe on one of our charts, we actually indicate that for those pesticides that are in the list, you know, how harmful those particular pesticides are to bees.
Yeah, I'm
Just a
also
question.
going to add to that, you know, read the label for the materials.
Right.
In the environmental hazards section, if there is a known problem with honeybees or other pollinators, it's listed there that this should not be applied, not just during bloom of what you're going to treat, but bloom underneath the tree or in that area, because it's a hazard. Remember, these are insecticides, and so are the pollinators.
And we have to be very careful to protect our pollinators. So that's really important. And honeybees are not our only pollinators. We have many native pollinators as well that help us out on the farm and garden. There was a question on neem oil. Can you guys just speak to that, the azadirachtin in neem oil, and how effective that might be?
Yeah, and we've done quite a few studies looking at different neem products. And I think the general answer is they can work. They're in this category of lower toxicity, no residual activity. But we have seen some variation from one study to the next, depending on the life stage and the product that was tested. But I think it's still a good choice for people to use, to try neem.
It's a good choice. It is, however, toxic to bees, and I think a lot of people felt that because it was at the lower end of the pesticide spectrum that, you know, there was no impact, but we've learned that it can be toxic to bees.
And that's an important thing to remember, because even OMRI approved products, you know, can be toxic to bees. So you have to be very careful what you're using the product for, what time of the day you're using it, and always follow the label directions. Could you just speak a little bit on the biological control efforts that are ongoing right now and what you see as some promising things happening in the field?
Well, that's a really good question. I think there's a number of individuals at different institutions looking at parts of that question, but as of right now, there is nothing coming up that says this biological control or this biopesticide or something in that realm is going to offer a solution by itself. No one single pest management strategy is going to solve the spotted lanternfly problem by itself. It will always have to be a combination of efforts.
I want to thank our presenters today. And if you want to stay tuned and watch this video with us, we're going to take the next 5 or 10 minutes and we're going to show a video on how to build spotted lanternfly trap. Thank you very much, Emily and Amy and George.
Hi, I'm Brennan Pearsall, Program Coordinator with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. Today we're here to talk about this spotted lanternfly trap. The plans for this trap come from Penn State Extension, and you can find them on their website. And today we're going to show you how to build one of these out of simple parts that you may already have around your house or that you can get with a quick trip to the hardware store. This type of trap is great for homeowners who want to do something about the invasive pest spotted lanternfly because it's an option that involves no chemicals and no sprays of any kind. What it does is take advantage of spotted lanternfly's inherent tendency to climb up the side of trees. When spotted lanternfly nymphs or the flies themselves drop from trees or are blown down from wind, they like to climb back up the trunk to get into the canopy where they can feed. With a trap like this, as they climb up, they're going to get caught in this netting and they're going to get funneled upward into this collection bag. By taking advantage of their behavior, we can do a lot to eliminate a great number of spotted lanternflies on our property and help reduce the overall burden of this invasive pest. So if you come over to the workbench, I'm going to show you a little bit about how to build this. So just to go over a few of the things we're going to need. Strips of wood. In this case, I've already cut these strips of wood to 11 inches and 18 inches. These are going to form the backbone and spine of your funnel trap. You're also going to need some mesh screen. We used plastic mesh screen in this case, the same kind you would get for a screen door. They usually come in rolls, look something like this. You're only going to need about 23 inches off of that roll to make your trap. The funnels that you're going to use to collect spotted lanternfly can be made from the top of old milk jugs. These are what I'm going with today because they're fairly easily accessible. If you don't have these on hand, a large soda bottle or a large plastic bin, something like this, work just as well. You can also easily use a Ziploc bag, a gallon-sized one, which we're actually going to use at the end of this once we put our whole trap together. You'll also need duct tape and a length of wire. This one's been cut to 32 inches, and this is going to give us the frame of our tunnel that our lanternflies are going to go through. A few zip ties will help to hold things together, and a length of twine is going to help keep your trap secured to the tree. Some tools that you're going to need to make this trap include a stapler. I'm using a heavy-duty one, but a household stapler will probably work just as well. You'll need a pencil for doing some mark out, a hot glue gun, tape measure, smaller stapler, scissors, shears for cutting your wire to length, and a razor blade that you're going to use to cut the tops off your milk jugs. I've already pre-prepared much of this material, so everything I have is ready to assemble, and I'm going to walk you through the process right now. So to build our spotted lanternfly trap, we're going to first start by assembling the funnel. This is going to be the neck of your trap, and it's going to be what the lanternflies go to when they're heading into the collection bag. To do this, we're going to apply some hot glue just around the rim here. And then we're going to press the two pieces together. Once those are tacked together, a little bit of duct tape around the collar, make sure that they stay put. So, once you've put together your funnel, you can start working with the mesh. So like I said before, our mesh is 36 inches long by 23 inches across. To get the shape we're looking for, we want to fold down these sides until they meet in the middle. Crease here, and crease here. with your scissors, you're going to cut a semicircle right in the top. This is where your funnel's going to go. So once you have your screen folded and cut, it's time to attach it to the funnel. This process takes a little bit of time, but you're going to use your hot glue gun and you're just going to go around in the circle. Glue and move. And you're just attaching this to the inside of your funnel. So when you get to the very end, you want to overlap your netting just a little bit. For that final part, a staple right in the collar can help keep both pieces together and keep everything else intact. So once you've attached the inside, you should have something that looks similar to this. What this is going to allow is for the spotted lanternfly, as they crawl up the mesh, to go directly into this hole where they're going to be trapped on the other side. The next step for building our trap is to attach the spines that are going to help keep it rigid. First, we're going to take our 18-inch stick, and that's going to become the back. So that slides up inside here. And you can use your stapler to help do this part. So you want to put the spine, which is your 18-inch piece, is going to go along the back of the mesh. This is what's going to sit up against the tree and help to keep the trap rigid. Staple your webbing onto the outside of that 18-inch piece. That should help hold that on. If you're not sure, you can run a bead of hot glue along the back side of this just to give it a little extra strength. Now for the front, you're going to do a very similar thing, just using the shorter stick. Again, make sure that both sides of your webbing are overlapped so that the spotted lanternfly doesn't have a chance to get out that way. Line up with your stapler. And tack that into place. Once you've stapled both these on, you should have a cone that looks something like this. Again, a bead of hot glue along the face can help give this just a little bit of extra strength and help it hold together. The next step is to take your length of wire. This is what's going to help keep the tunnel rigid once it's actually mounted to the tree. To attach this, it's going to go underneath where the shorter piece of wood currently is. I'll be using my smaller stapler for this part because it's a little bit easier to maneuver. And you want to go around and you're going to roll the screening around the wire till it overlaps and then staple that together. So now you should have something that looks a little bit like this. You've got your spine, you've got your front brace, and you've got your wire that's going to help keep the tunnel in shape. So for mounting our trap, we're going to want two pieces of rope. One shorter one that's going to go around the top of the trap, where the funnel is, and a longer one that's going to hold the base tight against the tree. You want to try to avoid using nails or anything like that to mount this. Putting nails through the bark of the tree can actually do damage and can expose it to diseases over time. So we're going to try to do this without actually puncturing the bark of the tree. So let's head over and we'll get this mounted. So for hanging our spotted lanternfly trap, we want to look for a spot about 4 to 5 feet off the ground on the side of our tree. Now, to make sure it stays tight to the tree, we're going to use a special type of knot. We start by making a loop in our rope. We're going to wrap that loop around itself, and we're going to tuck it back through. So you should end up with a piece of rope that looks something like this. Now, to tie it to the tree, we're going to hold our trap up against it, pass the rope around, and we're going to take the loose end and tuck it through that loop. What this lets us do is pull tight. And now that's going to hold that against that tree, and there's much less chance of it coming loose. To finish this knot off, we can pinch here, loop the rope back through, and tie it off against the tree. One more time, we'll make sure that that stays in place. Now, to attach the bottom, we're also going to use the rope. This time we'll take the longer one. Same as before, we're going to make our loop, tie it around itself, tuck it back through. Then we're going to gather the loose skirt of our trap and wrap that around behind the tree. Once that's all gathered and pulled as tight as you can, you're going to adjust this to make sure that your tunnel still has the form that you want it to. Wrap your rope around. And tuck it through the loop. Now this is the part you might need to do some adjustments to line up, but it's important that the bottom of this netting stay flush up against the tree. You want that to be tight, otherwise the spotted lanternfly is going to be able to crawl up underneath of it and still get to the top of the tree, avoiding your trap. Once you feel confident that you have this spaced out, cinch it down and complete your knot. Now you have a spotted lanternfly trap that should take good advantage of their behavior. You can adjust the frame of your wire to help keep that opening. Now, when the spotted lanternflies drop down from the tree, they're going to follow their natural instinct to climb up, and when they do, they're going to run into this netting. This netting is going to direct them up to the funnel, where we're going to mount a bag that's going to collect them. So to finish off our spotted lanternfly trap, we're just going to mount the collection bag. A normal gallon Ziploc bag can slide over the top of this. Use a zip tie to loop it around, and then gather all the extra material down inside the zip tie. Once you've zipped that up, you now have your collection chamber for your trap. Any spotted lanternfly that climbs up inside here is going to end up in the bag, and once they're in there, they should be pretty well stuck. Spotted lanternfly, like many other insects, is not particularly good at finding its way back out of situations like this. So once they're trapped in there, they'll stay there until you're ready to dispose of them. If you see this bag getting full, it's easy enough just to clip that zip tie, throw out the whole bag, and put a new one on. Thank you for joining me today to learn how to build this spotted lanternfly trap. Hope you have luck building it on your own. If you learned from this video and build a few of these traps, please send them in to us. We'd love to see the work that you do. For those of you who are looking for more information on spotted lanternfly, you can visit us at Rutgers at njaes.rutgers.edu/spotted-lanternfly. There you'll find all our information and fact sheets on how to deal with spotted lanternfly, and you'll learn a little bit more about what Rutgers is doing to deal with this invasive pest. Thanks.
I want to thank Amy and Emily and George and Dave Smella for putting all this, helping to put all this together, as well as Angela Monahan for monitoring. And my name is Bill Lubick, and have a great evening, everyone.